Right. So get this. You've got Conor McGregor, the king of the octagon, calling out Logan Paul for a fight. And Logan Paul, you know him, right? The social media guy.
Yeah.
Talk about a clash of worlds, right?
Yeah.
And just when things are getting interesting, the whole thing falls apart.
Right.
What a letdown.
Well, what's interesting here is how McGregor was playing this whole thing. He wasn't just hyping up a fight,
Right.
He was connecting it directly to the TKO group, the parent company of both the UFC and WWE.
Right.
He even called himself the TKO king.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty clever, huh?
Yeah, he was practically screaming money fight from the rooftops.
Yeah.
And let's be real, a fight between these two, with their combined star power, massive fan bases, would have been a cash cow.
Yeah.
Imagine the pay-per-view numbers, the sponsorships, the merchandise.
Yeah.
It would have been insane.
McGregor's not just a fighter, he's a businessman.
Right.
By publicly linking the fight to TKO's stock price, he was essentially incentivizing the company to make it happen.
Yeah.
Talk about playing 4D chess.
He even threw in a little jab, calling the potential match a glorified spar.
Yeah.
So he's acknowledging the skill gap, but at the same time, he's playing up the entertainment factor, right? Knowing that's what gets people hooked.
Exactly. He understands the business side of this game better than almost anyone. And this whole TKO group angle is particularly intriguing because it also ties into the potential of the Indian market.
Oh, yeah.
They're a huge untapped audience for combat sports, and a McGregor-Paul fight would have been a perfect way to make a splash there.
So you've got McGregor, the master strategist, laying out this brilliant plan that would benefit everyone involved, and then bam.
Yeah.
The UFC steps in and says, nope, not happening.
Right.
What gives?
This is where the power dynamics get really interesting. Despite McGregor's enthusiasm and the potential financial windfall, the UFC ultimately holds the cards. They control their fighters' contracts, and they clearly weren't keen on letting McGregor step into a WWE ring.
So much for TKO King, right?
Yeah.
It seems like the UFC wanted to keep their kingdom separate from WWE's, even though they're technically under the same corporate roof.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head-scratcher. You'd think they'd be all over this opportunity to collaborate, rake in the cash.
Right.
But there's clearly something else going on behind the scenes.
Makes you wonder. Was there some internal tension?
Yeah.
Maybe the UFC felt like they'd be playing second fiddle to WWE in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Or perhaps there were concerns about how a crossover fight would impact their brand image.
Or maybe, just maybe, they have bigger plans for McGregor down the line.
Oh, okay.
We know he's been hinting at a return to the UFC octagon, and they might be saving him for a more traditional matchup.
Ooh, now that you mention it, I can see the UFC wanting to hold off on McGregor fighting outside their organization, especially if they're planning a big comeback fight for him within the UFC.
Right.
That would make sense.
Exactly. It's all about strategy and control. The UFC has built itself into a global powerhouse, and they're not going to let anyone, not even Conor McGregor, dictate their moves.
So while this McGregor-Paul showdown may have fizzled out, it has definitely given us a peek behind the curtain of these combat sports empires. It's like a high-stakes game of chess with fighters, promoters, and organizations all vying for power and influence.
Absolutely. And don't forget, there's another player in this game, Logan Paul.
Right.
He's been making waves in the boxing world and has even stepped into the WWE ring.
Right.
What do you think his angle was in all of this?
That's a great question, and it leads us to our next point.
Logan Paul, he's a master of self-promotion.
Right.
He knows how to generate hype and leverage social media to build his brand.
Right.
A fight against McGregor, even a glorified spar, would have been a huge step up for him in terms of legitimacy and exposure.
Yeah, he's no stranger to controversy either.
Yeah.
Remember that whole debacle with the Japanese forest?
Right.
And let's not forget his recent win against Dylan Dennis, McGregor's former teammate. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
That's right. That Dennis fight adds another layer of intrigue to the whole situation.
Yeah.
Was Paul genuinely interested in testing himself against McGregor, or was this more about capitalizing on the hype and creating a narrative that would, boost his profile even further?
He's definitely playing the game, that's for sure. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he was secretly hoping the UFC would block the fight.
Yeah.
He would just add to his outsider status, the guy who's shaking things up, challenging the establishment.
It's a classic underdog story.
Right.
The YouTube star taking on the fighting world. And even though the fight didn't happen, just the fact that it was even a possibility, speaks volumes about how much the landscape of combat sports is changing.
It's like those old kung fu movies where the young, brash challenger comes out of nowhere and disrupts the established order. And you know what? Sometimes they even win.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. You have these two worlds colliding. The traditional world of combat sports with its strict rules and hierarchies, and the wild, unpredictable world of social media and online entertainment.
Yeah, it's like a culture clash, but with punches and takedowns.
Yeah.
And in a way, Logan Paul represents this new breed of fighter-entertainer.
Right.
He's not just about winning belts and titles. He's about building a brand, creating content, and connecting with a global audience.
And that's something that, the UFC might be grappling with.
Right.
Their business model has always been focused on pay-per-view events with a select group of elite fighters at the top. But now you have someone like Logan Paul who can generate millions of views on YouTube and sell out arenas without ever stepping foot in the octagon.
Right. It's a whole different game, and the rules are still being written.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm kind of enjoying the chaos of it all. It's shaking things up, and that's always a good thing.
It's definitely forcing the traditional powers that be to adapt. They can't just ignore this new wave of entertainment. They have to find a way to either embrace it or counter it.
But let's go back to the UFC's decision to nix this fight.
Yeah.
It begs the question, is the UFC missing out on a golden opportunity to expand their reach?
It's a gamble, right?
Right.
The UFC has worked hard to build its brand as the premier mixed martial arts organization in the world.
Right.
They have to be careful about who they associate with, and they might be worried that a crossover fight with someone like Logan Paul could dilute their brand.
But couldn't it also be seen as a way to bring in a whole new audience?
Right.
Logan Paul has millions of followers who might not typically watch UFC events.
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. It's a balancing act between maintaining their core identity and adapting to the changing demands of the entertainment landscape.
It's like they're standing at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Do they stick to the tried and true, or do they take a risk and venture into uncharted territory?
And the answer might depend on, how they view their future.
Right.
Do they want to remain the undisputed king of combat sports, or are they open to evolving into something more, something that encompasses, a wider range of entertainment experiences?
I guess only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. The UFC's decision to shut down this fight has set ripples throughout the combat sports world.
Absolutely. It has sparked a debate about the future of the sport, the power dynamics within these organizations, and the role of entertainment in attracting new audiences.
And speaking of power dynamics, it's interesting to consider the relationship between the UFC and WWE.
Right.
They're both owned by the same parent company, the TKO Group. But this whole incident suggests there might be some underlying tension or competition.
Yeah, it's like they're siblings vying for their parents' attention.
Right.
You've got the UFC, the older, more established brother who's, built a reputation on pure athleticism and competition.
And then you've got the WWE, the younger, flashier brother who's all about entertainment and spectacle.
And while they might share the same DNA, so to speak, they've always operated in separate spheres.
Right.
The UFC prides itself on its realism, its grit, its anything can happen atmosphere.
Yeah.
The WWE, on the other hand, embraces a more theatrical approach with predetermined outcomes and larger-than-life characters.
It's like comparing a street fight to a Shakespearean play.
Yeah.
Both can be entertaining in their own right, but they appeal to different sensibilities.
Exactly. And for years, those lines were pretty clearly drawn.
Yeah.
But now with the rise of social media and this blurring of lines between sports and entertainment, those boundaries are starting to get a little fuzzy.
It's almost like these two worlds are on a collision course, and this whole McGregor-Paul situation feels like a taste of what might be to come.
Yeah.
Could we see a future where the UFC and WWE collaborate more openly?
Yeah.
Maybe even co-promote events or create crossover storylines?
It's definitely a possibility. Imagine the hype if you had a UFC champion stepping into a WWE ring.
Right.
Or a WWE superstar trying their hand in the octagon.
Oh, man.
It would be a ratings bonanza.
Can you imagine The trash talk,
Oh, yeah.
the build-up, the sheer spectacle of it all.
Yeah.
It would be like the Super Bowl of combat sports.
And think of the storytelling potential.
Right.
You could have rivalries that span both organizations.
Yeah.
Characters switching sides, betrayals, alliances.
Oh, wow.
It would be a soap opera for fight fans.
But it wouldn't be without its challenges. You'd have to find a way to blend the different fighting styles, ensure the safety of the athletes, and figure out how to handle the inevitable clash of egos.
And let's not forget the fans.
Right.
Diehard UFC fans might not appreciate their favorite fighters being mixed up in the, fake world of WWE, and vice versa. There could be a real backlash.
It'd be a delicate balancing act for sure. But if they could pull it off, it would be a game changer for the entire combat sports industry.
It would be a new era of entertainment, one where the lines between reality and spectacle become increasingly blurred.
And who knows? Maybe that's exactly what the future holds. After all, in the world of combat sports, anything is possible. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the almost fight that could have been, the question remains, will the UFC and WWE continue to circle each other from afar?
Yeah.
Or will they finally step into the ring together and create something truly epic? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.